It is my privilege to talk to you about something called daily review. Daily review is a small part of an explicit instruction model. I'm going to show you some videos and hopefully you will feel competent enough to have a go when you go back to your schools. I also am very happy, if you do want to email me, I can probably send you a PowerPoint to get you going if you'd like to have a try. I do a lot of work in schools. The schools to the far right of your screen are from the Kimberley Schools project. In the middle you'll see St Peter's Woodlands Grammar, which is of course a school in Adelaide. If you wanted to have a look at how a daily review works, then they may show you if you've never seen it before. There's also other schools across Australia and plenty in Western Australia that do this. In this session I want to really talk to you about what a daily review is and how, more importantly, it impacts on something called cognitive load, and I will test that at some point, and automaticity, and then how it fits into the bigger explicit instruction model that we use particularly in Western Australia and we absolutely use in the Kimberley Schools project, and then how it supports literacy development, and as I said, there will be videos. What is daily review? It's part of a bigger explicit instruction model that we use in Western Australia. It is at the beginning of a lesson. It's a fast-paced review of previously learned material. Then we add on to that sometimes a lesson, maybe 2 a week. In secondary, if you see them 4 times a week, you'll probably do a daily review, 3 out of 4, and you might do 2 lessons. And if you were the science teacher, you might have an experiment lesson, which wouldn't be explicit, and you might have a write-up lesson that wouldn't be explicit, but 2 out of 4 lessons probably in those main subjects would be explicit. And there's lots of high schools now in WA who do this. It's not the only thing they do, but they do it because they want to teach well. So lesson design and lesson delivery components apply to both this daily review and also a lesson. When I go into schools, they'll go, oh, we teach explicitly, and I'll have to say, you know what, my explicit's not your explicit. When you look at any of these definitions that do the rounds, you'll see that there's words like this, concrete and visible, and teachers go, ask me, concrete and visible, absolutely. Explain. I spend so long explaining, I talk for the whole lesson. That's not explicit. And you know what? Examples. I give out worksheets and there's like 30 examples and they don't do them all. That's not explicit either. When we're talking about explicit instruction, we're talking about this. We're talking about a term that really describes effective teaching. They're really synonyms, if you like, for really effective teaching. But if I say really effective teaching, teachers go, yeah, I do that. People don't often understand what the elements are. This is from Rosenshine, and whether you wish to call it little d, little I, direct instruction, not the scripted version, or explicit teaching, or highly effective teaching, or we call it targeted teaching in my Kimberley Schools project. Call it whatever you like. This is what it is. It has 3 critical elements. Number 1, you break things into small chunks. Do not endeavour to teach an entire lesson on simplifying fractions in one day and expect them to learn it. That won't happen. You've got to break it down. They need to know what a denominator is, what a numerator is. If they don't know those things, they won't be able to appreciate your marvellous lesson. The next thing we have to do is to make sure that we are regularly checking for understanding. Usually I get my pop sticks out. Everybody has a number. We all get to participate. How much more attention do you pay if I've got your number? A lot more. That's a way of stopping kids from checking out to their happy place. I'll call upon you. What you also need to do is to make sure the kids are participating. So you will see in the examples from the video, everybody participating. We need to find a way to get all the kids to do something. So there are those 3 elements. When I work in schools around explicit instruction, they are the main 3 things that I look for. But there are certain tools that we have that enable us to get those going. When I talk about explicit instruction, we have to acknowledge it fits somewhere along the continuum of how we teach. And there's nothing wrong with, or nothing right, that you must only teach in a certain way. So just be mindful of that. We make a choice as a teacher. And there are times when I'll go with a more constructivist approach. But if you are teaching something for the first time and it's new and it's tricky, you're probably better off teaching explicitly. When you go to the research literature, you won't find much on explicit instruction. You will, however, find things called fully guided practice. That's what explicit instruction is. So it says to the child, what do I have to do as a teacher? What is the most efficient and effective way of getting you to understand something, as opposed to, down the other end, what activities can I put out that will help you to come to your own understanding of? So it's about a child making meaning. It's a time and a place for both, but if I'm teaching any of those things listed below, reading and spelling, unnatural, difficult, maths, I'm going to use explicit instruction first. When the kids have a high level of literacy, then I'm very happy for them to go into a more of an inquiry-based mode. And all the schools that I work with in WA that are high-performing schools, and there are plenty of them, all do inquiry, but they do it after the kids can read and write. As I said, there's nothing wrong with either of these, so I wouldn't suggest you always did one or always did the other. They're part of the repertoire of tools that teachers have. My issue is a lot of teachers, particularly coming through universities, don't know about explicit instructivism. I've only ever heard of constructivism. They're both totally legitimate ways in terms of how we as adults learn. The explicit instruction is more suited to the novice learner, and at times that's all of us. So this daily review is really important when it comes to explicit instruction. Whether you want to call it daily review, people in Queensland call it consolidation. I heard ignition the other day. I call it daily review. Some people call it warm-up. It doesn't really matter what you call it. It does exactly the same thing. It takes information from short to long-term memory. It comes from the work of Rosenshine. You can download this, it's free online. It's a great article to read. And he has these principles of instruction. And so if you pursue this article, you'll see that this man's career began by watching expert teachers. His work ties into the work of somebody like Eric Hanushek, who's an economist, and he says that a pretty average teacher might just get half a year's growth in 1 year of learning. But a really good teacher, like the one that Rosenshine was observing, might get 1.5 years in 1 year. They do certain things that really seem to advance learning. So that's where Barack Rosenshine's work started. Then he's got interested in how we present complex things to kids and said, okay, if you break things down, if you do a think aloud, if you use a mnemonic, these are all really important cognitive hooks, and he writes about them in that article. Then along came the cognitive neuroscience. Now, this wasn't even around when he first started in the 60s, but this gave a window into what the human brain actually does when it learns. What do we now know about the human brain and how it learns? And that's what Barack Rosenshine described. So these are the elements, if you like, of effective instruction. And the one that I focus on in this session is the first one, which is daily review, and it also has implications for number 10 as well. My son in year 2 learned how to tell the time. All the information came home in a maths folder, and I looked through it and I went, oh, Jet, this is marvellous. You've learned to tell the time. What time is it? And he went, I don't know. I said, okay, this is really important. This is a life skill. You have to learn how to tell the time. So dashed off to IKEA, got 2 plastic clocks, got a bit of help because I'm not a maths teacher from a friend of mine, made some PowerPoints and said, right, every day when you come downstairs in the morning before you do anything that brings you joy, there will be no food, there will be no Xbox, there will be no TV, there will be nothing. You just come downstairs and do your clocks with me. So there was a lot of grumbling, but eventually I got there, and a week and a half into it, he was a gun at telling the time. And then I went back to work and he went back to school, and he moved on to a whole unit on measurement. Time was never mentioned again. And so sure enough, a couple of weeks later, what time is it yet? Oh, don't know. This is what daily review does well. It says, okay, you've just invested as a teacher a considerable chunk of your life teaching something. So what we need to do is to help that brain to remember. It is fanciful to say to teenagers, go home and review. You as the secondary teacher says, well, go home, I've put that up on Connect tonight. You go home and review the lesson. No way. It doesn't happen. So a better way to do it is to have a fast-paced review at the beginning of your lesson, whereby your teachers figure out in secondary and primary what is the most important thing to know about maths. So a daily review for maths would include things like times tables, measurement, time, shapes, algorithms, whatever your year level is, and you just rotate through these. And schools who do it well, they do what's called interleaving. They make sure that they mix it up. So that brain is constantly having to remember. Whatever you attend to, you remember. So making them remember helps it to get into their long-term memory. And we do it for literacy as well. So all of these elements are part of explicit instruction. The first thing we try and do, because you don't want kids just chanting at a screen. And people go to me, oh yeah, they've seen this daily review thing, they just chant at a screen. They go, No, we don't. What we need to do is to make sure that it's cognitive activity. Otherwise, it's just like a diuretic. They just keep saying it and it goes on and on and on, and we don't want that. So you got to teach first. It's no point me coming into a classroom and pointing at the screen and saying, read that word. because I need to prepare myself for disappointment. There will be children who don't know that word and they'll just sit there passively, and then the student will say it, and then we'll all move on. So I will always say, this is the word, what word? And they will have to say it back after me. So I'm always teaching first. So then we get them to try and do something with it. So we really want to try and get it in their brain. So we're saying, hey, remember this, remember this, remember this. And then finally, we try and get them to use it in some way. Put it in a sentence, read these words. We've just been doing digraphs. O-A, O-A, O-O-O, E-E-E-E-E-E-E, A-I-A-I-A-I-A. Girls and boys, on your whiteboards, I want you to write me 3 words that have got O-A in them. Do that now. They're on the screen in case you've forgotten. They write them down on their boards. So this is constant attempt to get the kids doing something with that information. What we're also doing too is doing it at pace. When you see the videos, don't be affronted by the pace. People say, oh, how do the kids cope? Kids cope fine. It's you that find it hard if you're doing it for the first time, because to get that pace going, you've got to work out, what am I going to say? What are they going to do? What am I going to do? All these things have to fall into place, but then you get pace. Now, pace is really important for any kid, but particularly in the populations I work with in the Kimberley. There's 2 reasons we would use a daily review: to practice and automatise everything we've learnt so far in something, whether it be HASS, whether it be maths, whether it be literacy, whatever it is. We're going to remind the kids, like, hey, remember we did this a while ago, keep it in your brain, because we want you to be able to access it, to do something with it. So if we've done vocab, and you'll see a video on vocab, you're going to have to use that in your writing. So I want you to be able to read those words, spell those words, because you're going to use it for more higher order things down the track. Or if I'm about to teach a lesson on sentence writing, there's a very good chance I will review capital letters and full stops and punctuation, so the kids know what they have to do in their sentence when they go to write it. So sometimes it's tailored to the task, other times it's just hell for leather, all these things that we have learnt. In early childhood, we can do it in the Kimberley for a maximum of 40 minutes. And in that time, we can review every component of literacy. There's then a lesson on top of that, but it's this fast-paced review that really has been a game changer for our children. So in a moment, you're going to see a daily review, and this is the spelling of vocabulary words. What I want you to do is to talk to the person sitting next to you about Renee's instructional style, some things you see the kids actually doing, and then how this compares to what you learnt at uni or what you do currently in your classroom. To give credit to Renee, she is a beginning teacher. She did a very short course, well, 1-week intensive at this particular school. Our children there know what they're doing because they're used to this instructional routine. And she's employed by a school called Ellen Sterling Primary School. For those of you who know WA, it's in Ellenbrook. It has a relatively low ICSIA and plenty of challenges around behaviour. This video was made at the end of last year, so she's had a year to finesse this. Rambunctious Year 5 students. So this was a year level that everybody went, oh gosh, these kids are a bit tough. So let's have a look at what she does.
What's the word? Incessant. What do we do? We say the word. What's the word? Incessant. What do we do? Ready up. How many parts? Incessant. 3. How many sounds? Let's go. Eight sounds. Boys and girls, incessant is an adjective, and an adjective describes a noun. Beautiful. And it means when something continues without stopping. So in a full sentence answer, incessant means when something continues without stopping. Tell your shoulder partner what incessant means.
Incessant means when something continues without stopping.
Beautiful. When they call out your popstick, can you please stand and deliver? Alex, what does incessant mean?
Incessant means when something continues without stopping.
Absolutely. Incessant does mean when something continues without stopping. Jason, what does incessant mean?
Incessant means when something continues without stopping.
Beautiful. Very good. Everyone all together, what does incessant mean?
Incessant means when something continues without stopping.
And that's the script. So if you downloaded my PowerPoint, you should have got some big slides. That's the script that went with it. So if you want to replicate this, you've got to figure out what to say. So that's a little bit of a starter for you. Tell the person sitting next to you the answer to these questions. Some words to describe the instructional style. Vibrant, very direct, very fast-paced. Remember that the kids have been finessing this for a while. So has she. What were the kids doing? Gesturing. There was gesturing going on. Talking to their partner, bit of pair share going on. What she's doing is she's ticking off all the engagement norms, and we'll have a look at those engagement norms shortly. It's a very dynamic presentation, and she had pop sticks going as well. Notice how they had to stand up and give their answer. That's an expectation at Ellen Sterling Primary School. The kids were very busy, weren't they? So there was no opportunity not to be doing the right thing. But they all willingly did it, and they love the routine of it because they're very used to it as well. That's your first example of a daily review. I will tell you that there's abundance of enthusiasm there from Renee. She loves doing it. The kids enjoy doing it. That's part of the thing too. So it is about will and do, and it's about skill, and she's got both. Here's the bit that I think really matters. It's how daily review actually reduces cognitive load and builds automaticity. Arguably, it's the most important thing for you to know as teachers, but I dare say you didn't learn about it when you were at university. People tell me sometimes they learnt about it in psych, they might have learnt about it in other degrees, but it doesn't tend to be happening in education. So it is the single most important thing for teachers to know. There's 3 levels which you've got to be mindful of. Intrinsic load is where you can just do it. Extraneous load is like, I just can't do this, it's too much. You just capitulate. So I'll give you an example of that. The other morning I was up early trying to fix up stuff for this. My husband comes along and he's seen something on his Twitter feed. He wants to show me. My son comes down and starts demanding something for breakfast. My friend has a radio show. He's on the radio. I'm trying to listen to him as well because he asked me questions about what he did on the radio and whether I heard it or not. And it's just suddenly all too much. My brain is full. I can't do it. There's just too many things going on at once. That's what we mean by extraneous load. And germane load is you've got the juggle right. You've presented it in a way to kids where they can follow you and they can come along with you. So you're in charge of what's called germane load. The problem is we put kids under extraneous load all the time without even realising it. If you can imagine the page in front of you, the set of notes, whatever you've got in front of you that's about the size of an A4 sheet, we'll call that the space in your brain that does the business of thinking and problem solving. And the trouble is it's finite and it's fixed. And so to get anything into your long-term memory, it's got to go via that piece of paper. And that's where the problem tends to occur. So you're sitting here, you're listening to me, there's a little bit of noise around the room. We take in information all the time and your brain has to figure out whether it's even going to bother. Am I going to pay attention to what I see around me, what I hear around me? And a lot of stuff you don't even bother paying attention to. So as a teacher, that's our first challenge. Now the trouble is just to get the brain to engage, it's just all over in a moment if we don't actually do something with that information. So then hopefully we've got it into working memory. We're giving it some thought. We're thinking about it. This is good. We're thinking about it. Now the problem with working memory is it's got very poor retention. It's like 15 to 30 seconds. So you meet somebody new and you get their name wrong. That's what you remember. But remembering their name, think about the time when you had to remember something recently. I'll share an example with you in a moment. You've got to rehearse it, don't you? You've got to rehearse it. Keep it in my mind. Keep it in my mind. Do something with it. Do something with it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Otherwise, you forget it. And the trouble is we can only remember between 7 plus or minus 2. So it's hard for us to remember all this. If we want to get it into our long-term memory, where we do want to get it, because that's where you just know it, and I'll give you an example of that in just a moment, then you have to do something as a teacher. So that's your job as a teacher. By getting kids to review something and think about it, and go back into their brain and grab it, and go back and think about it, go back and grab it. So they continually have to delve into their brain to grab the information that they need, or they're thinking about it. That's what we do for daily review. We're trying to get stuff into their long-term memory. Some years ago, when I was in the Kimberley, I had a Kimberley husband who was fantastic. He was very similar to my own husband. We spent a lot of time together, traipsing around the Kimberley. It was a smooth transition from the house to the car. Anyway, we were driving around one day and we wound up in Fitzroy Crossing, and I was thinking about some presentations that I was going to do. And so I stood behind him at the garage and he was giving over the odometer meter reading to the person behind the console. And so he said, it's 31,385. And so I was like, right, you're not to write this down, but you are to remember it. So I stood there, 31,000, remember, don't write it down. He'd have a conversation with me, I go, remember. So I went out of my way to remember a completely useless bit of information. And I didn't write it down, and then a week passed and I did the presentation. I said, and Paul, what was that? He says, how would I know? I said, I remember, because I thought about it. Now, every time I do this slide, I have to say the number because that helps me to remember it. It's completely useless. I have never written it down, but I can remember it. I've had to train my brain to think about it. That's what you do with a daily review. So if we just contrast long-term versus short-term memory, this will be familiar to some of you. You've heard a song on the radio, you go, oh, I know that song, I know every song on that album, I'll go get that album. And then you walk into the room and you go, what am I doing in here? Long-term, short-term memory. The other day I did this with a bunch of teachers, and one lady could remember 55 years ago the telephone number that she had when she still lived in the UK before they came to Australia. I said to her, when was the last time? She said, no one's ever asked me that. 55 years. That's your long-term memory. Lying there dormant. At a moment's notice you can retrieve it. How cool is that? So that's what we want. You think about the things that really count that you're trying to teach kids. That's what you want in that long-term memory. How do we get it in there? Well, what did you do to keep it in your brain? How did you hold it there? You had a mother like mine who said, when you answer the telephone, you say, hello, 945, and you had to give the number. Lorraine speaking. My mother drilled that into me as a child. Boy, did that help to learn the telephone number. Or maybe you're old enough like me to remember dialing. And you didn't have to look. You knew you'd made a mistake. That's motor memory. So that was really cool. Maybe like me, eventually we went from a dialing phone to a touch button phone. That was so exciting. But that was down one end of the house. And so if I wanted to ring the boyfriend late at night, I'd sneak out. I had to remember in the dark his number, all right? Because you knew how to punch the numbers, yeah? And maybe the main reason why you remembered was because your mum and dad said, and don't forget, call home. So whatever you did to keep it in your mind required practice. That's what we mean when we talk about daily review. Nobody can operate under too much cognitive load. If it's impacting on your working memory, you simply can't learn. So in a moment, you're going to have a go at doing some problem solving for me, but nobody can write down the answer, all right? Play nice, don't write down the answer. I tell you now, only 4 people in Australia have ever got this right. So pressure's on, Adelaide. You put a number in your head for me, please. Got it? I want you to times it by itself. Double the answer, 30% of the answer, add 8, divided by 11, times that by itself, minus 1, divided by 12, times 5.5. And the answer is, I'll show you what the answer was, it's 77. And the answer indeed is 77. Now, I could completely reduce the load on you there by doing something simple, but let's have a look. Who have you just checked out? And there's some people who checked out who won't admit they checked out. There wasn't too many of you going, yeah, I haven't got this. And then some of you just looked horrified. Being good at that required 2 things. Mental maths. Shame on you for not knowing your 15 times table. That's all I can say. If only you'd known your 15 times table, we wouldn't be in this sorry situation. So that was the first problem, wasn't it? Now, the other issue was you're probably good with the algorithms, but you couldn't do the basic math. If I said 5 times 5, how much easier would that be? That's Germain load. I can still do the same thing with you, but I can just make it a whole lot easier. Think about that when you work with kids. Sometimes you've got to drop it down. You can still teach the same thing. But the really able kids, they can do this and make it harder. But all we were trying to do here, perhaps, was to do a bit of mental computation and some revision on algorithms. So make it a bit easier for them. You experienced information overload, and it's not just a metaphor, it is a physical state. And I saw it on some of your faces. It was like, whoop, can't do this, too hard. We need to turn down the information to a trickle for some kids. In fact, if it's tricky for everybody. So the problem is, here we are, because we do like to stuff things into them, particularly in high school. And high school teachers will say to me, oh, I've got so much to get through, I couldn't possibly teach explicitly. What are they learning? Nothing. Pick the big things that you want them to know and teach it well, rather than driving this, I've got to teach more, I've got to teach more. They just don't remember. So think about where you were when we did that task. I dare say some of you were indeed in the panic zone. And that's okay for a task like that because it doesn't matter. But for some kids, that's the panic zone every day. They just don't have the precursor skills to do it well enough. You don't want to be in the comfort zone because it's too easy. Okay, so we go back to somebody like Vygotsky and we say, yeah, a bit of struggle's okay. A bit of struggle is good. Brain likes a bit of struggle, but it's easily overwhelmed. So when you feel you're overwhelmed, there are times when they feel exactly the same way. So this is a little thing about maths. It's saying that if your brain doesn't have to work as hard on simple maths, it has more working memory free to process the teacher's brand new lesson on more complex maths. You're learning your addition and multiplication times tables, really helps. Kids know this stuff. They can process higher order skills. Now, this comes from work with John Sweller, and he was in the Australian recently because, of course, there were the Australian of the Year awards, and they put up some people that they thought should get Australian of the Year award, and he is alive. He is a cognitive scientist, and he's largely behind all these ideas on cognitive load, if you want to check out his work. Let's have a look at another daily review. This is the magnificent Fiona. This is a school in a part of WA in Metro Perth that has a high number of kids who don't speak English as their first language. So only 3 of Fiona's class speak English as their first language. If that's your situation, this is how it might work for you. Again, what did she teach? And perhaps some things you saw the kids doing in the video.
Catch up and do our daily review. We've got everything in there, just a little bit of everything. Are you ready? Literacy, daily review. Single sounds are?
One letter that makes one sound.
Awesome. Short vowels, what are they? Write your name and underline the vowels. Your name, just your first name, and underline the vowels. Good, Mason, you've got 2 vowels. Underline them. And hold on when you're done. 5, 4, 3, 2, there, the vowels. Have you got them in your name? 2, 1, chin. Osman, awesome. Victor, show me what you've got. Great, on guard, there's a waiter, well done. You have got a U. Mark, good try. Okay, down the dust. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Eyes to me. Consonants. Ready, Chelsea? Let's go. Consonants. Consonants are all the letters that are
Not found.
awesome. These are our stop sounds. Let's say our stop sounds. Yeah. Awesome. Let's have a look at our continuous sounds. Remember, we hold them for how long? 3 seconds. Let's go. Well done, Mason. Make sure you're looking at the board. Track and blend these sounds with me. Let's go. Ba, go. Ba, ba, t, bat. Ba, ba. Let's go. Ha, go. Ha, ha, t, hat.
One of the things that is a hallmark of a really good daily review is that you pre-teach what the kids need to know in order to do the harder skill. So they had to sound out those words. And that is a template slide because I've helped her to design these slides. And so what we do is we have a slide like that and she just drops out those vowel sounds and she has a brand new... So the kids know exactly what to do when she gets to that slide. But all the precursor skills had been revised. So the kids had to say the sounds, say vowel sounds, consonant sounds, and they had to put it together to decode some words. The idea that practice makes perfect is sort of right, but we want it to make it permanent, and we also are concerned about the type of practice too. We want to make it perfect. So the kids are always practicing the correct thing. They're not figuring it out for themselves. We're also mindful that standard 15-minute phonics lesson that Fiona would have previously taught in her classroom might have involved some groups. Kids might have been moving between activities. It wouldn't be so teacher-led. What we've done is we've taken that and we've grown it into about a 45-minute literacy daily review that contains lots of things. It contains PA, it contains phonics, it contains reading words, non-words, sentences, passages, vocab, spelling, writing. All these things are now wrapped up all together. And the kids spend, as you would have seen, no more than about 90 seconds to maybe 3 minutes max on any given task. Now, Fiona prefers to have them at their desk because they're not good on the mat, and that's okay. But mostly I'd have them on the mat and I'd have them moving around a lot as well. So the idea is it's got to be a lot of movement involved too. If you do explicit instruction, you can't just have the bit you want. So if you came here today and you rode a bike, well, you didn't just come with the handlebars, did you? If you came in a car, you just didn't come with the steering wheel. So people will say to me, oh, yeah, I use those pop sticks. They're great. No. Remember, that might help you to ensure participation, but it's not helping you to break down the task. So it's this breaking down of the task that's absolutely critical, and you might be using whiteboards, and I see whiteboards in lots of schools, but maybe they're not used the way you saw Fiona or Renee use them in her video. And then finally, lots of people have Waltz and Wilfs up on the board as a sticker. That's great, but it's more than that. So one of the things that we do is we use the engagement norms, and we use something called TAPL and task analysis. So keep in mind that students remember what they attend to. My husband likes to spend a lot of time at Bunnings. And I said to him, when you get down to Bunnings, see if you can get me some listen up spray. Because we'd all like that as teachers, wouldn't we? Anyway, the sad reality is there's no listen up spray. But there is something called engagement norms. And this comes from the work of Hollingsworth and Ybarra. If you buy their book, Explicit Direct Instruction, you get an explanation, or you can just have a look at the notes that I put online. There they are. That's what all the engagement norms do. You can also download this poster directly from DataWorks. DataWorks is in America. Okay, there is an Australian company. It's not the same thing. And you can get a hold of that poster if this appeals to you. Or you can email me and I'll send it to you. The most important thing that you need to know is that all these engagement norms, when done together, are really terrific because they require the kids to stay and to participate and to respond. Kids who sit there passively are not learning anything. They've got to actually respond with everybody else. I just want to ask you this question. What is this? Now, quite frankly, people, I'm a little disappointed because we did this last week. That you can't remember it, my goodness. And I see this all the time in high schools. People get really upset. Nobody knows at all? Oh, who said trebuchet? Hands up. Oh, very good. Yes. Well done. Don't hide down the back there. You're my superstar. What's that person's name? Luke. Thank God you're here, Luke. Look at the rest of them. My goodness, no idea. Now here's the problem. This happens all the time in classrooms. I say, what's this? And Luke says, trebuchet. And I go, fantastic, Luke. Well done, you. Thanks for remembering. And then I move on. What's happened to the rest of you? You've got no idea what it is. So if I want to teach you what a trebuchet is, this is where TAPL comes into it. I say, everybody put your arm out like this. Just do this. Won't hurt. Trebuchet. Watch this. Trebuchet. Do it with me. Trebuchet. One more time. Trebuchet. Watch this. Trebuchet. Do that. Trebuchet. I'm just about to get you to read that word. Okay? And you're whatever year level you are when we do this, but you've never seen that word before. It's a French word, by the way, which I'd probably tell you if I had you as my class, because, of course, it's got the sh as in champagne. That's the French level of language. We know that. I'm going to get you to read that word, but I have to get you to say it first. Otherwise, you're going to look at it and go, wow. And moreover, I have to read with you because otherwise you won't know what to say. So I'm going to say, listen, girls and boys, you're in my class now. Listen to this. I want you to track with your eyes. If you're little, I'll say, muscles, point. And the kids do that. They love it. But you're older, so we'll go, eyes only. Listen, a trebuchet is a type of catapult and common siege engine used in medieval times to throw a projectile capable of smashing castle walls with ease. Read with me. Do that now. A trebuchet is a type of catapult and common siege engine used in medieval times to throw a projectile capable of smashing castle walls with ease. Tell your partner, what's a trebuchet? At this point in time, I would choose a non-volunteer, but of course I haven't given you a number, so that makes it a bit tricky. So I have to say, Rowena, what's a trebuchet? Now, thank you. We've just engaged in something called TAPL. Now, if you were my class and you were year sixes or year sevens, I would feel compelled to tell you that not only did they throw boulders over the wall, they threw dead bodies and diseased animals. How cool is that? That is what the kids would remember. Even though I'm teaching explicitly, I'm still making it interesting. Don't forget that. It's still got to be highly interesting and engaging because that's what they will remember. But my friends, what you did was you engaged in TAPL. So I taught you something first. I didn't engage in talent discovery because that discovered Luke. Didn't discover anyone else. That was the only one who got it right. Luke got it right. So rather than do talent discovery, my classroom is an equal opportunity classroom. Everybody got to participate. You got to listen to me, read it, then you repeated it with me. Then I asked you to tell your partner, and I love it that almost all of you read it off the screen to your partner. It's not a secret. So often in classrooms, people take it away. Right, remember that. Good luck. It's the first time you've ever learnt it, so I'm going to leave it up there. And you know what? It's going to turn up in my daily review tomorrow because I really want you to know this. If you're in my house class, it's important. Then I paused and then I asked you a question. I said, tell your partner, so you've got a chance to tell your partner. And then I said, okay, non-volunteers, and we had two. Two's about right. If my first non-volunteer had got it wrong, I would have gone, Lorraine, it's telling you something about your teaching. I won't blame Rowena. And then if the second one got it wrong, I'd go, Lorraine, start over, because they don't know. But you choose two students. You rattle your pop sticks. And you go, in a moment, I'm going to choose two people. You don't say, Michelle, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to say something, because what do the rest of you do? Check out to your happy place. So there's a bit of cunning involved in it. And then you listen to the response, and they were both fabulous full sentence answers. They used the word catapult, trebuchet in the same sentence. You had information in there about what it was. That is TAPL. And then obviously I was delighted because you got it right, so I gave you feedback. So this TAPL poster you can download as well. We do TAPL when we do daily review. We always teach first. Even if I'm doing times tables, I'm saying it with them in a louder voice to drown out the sillies. Because if you say, off you go, the kids will just look at you. You've got to set the pace. It's not for lazy teachers. So how it actually reduces cognitive load and builds automaticity, this is what we know about reading. We know that learning to read is unnatural. We are not pre-programmed for this. It is something our brain has to learn how to do. It's something very difficult to learn how to do. Decoding is a critical step in the beginning reading process because it requires kids to process the inner structure of words. Kids get a bit of a run-up with this, so I could, if I had time, show you some words you've never seen before, and you would slowly sound them out, and it would be painful. And you'd go, oh, I wonder if I got it right. Go back a few weeks to the beginning of the school year. There would have been a name on there, wouldn't there? So there's a name on the list. You think, oh, gosh, how do you say that? Last Saturday, my first face-to-face class for the year, I said, this is going to be a bit brutal, because there's a lot of students in my class who are LOTE teachers who come from different parts of the world. I said, just bear with me, this won't be pretty. And I had to go at decoding their names. Horrible. Then they said, no, you say it like this. And I went, okay. Now I look at the name, it's okay. So the thing is, adult brains are really good at decoding words, and we just automatically seem to read them, but little kids aren't like that. So what we're trying to do is to get to automatic word recognition. Go back to what Fiona was doing. Here are the letter sounds. We practice that every day. Let's blend it together into some words. Let's start with CVC words. Let's progressively make those words longer and harder, containing more information. Let's get the kids to the point where they're automatic with the process. That's why you do it in early childhood around reading. And then you saw Renee around spelling. Girls and boys, if you want to spell a word, listen for the sounds in the word, syllabify the word, say the sounds. It was a process there. She's saying, brain, remember this process as well as remember this word and how to spell it. And then obviously, if we get the kids to get the words off the page, then they can actually even begin to decode. So big part of this in literacy. So if you think about Marianne Wolf, she said it's not drill and kill, it's giving children multiple exposures to build the visual word form area. This is a nice graphic that explains what's going on in the brain when we learn how to read, but I can tell you now that that visual word form area begins to appear in the brain of non-readers after 5 hours of instruction. That's what you're trying to do, get that brain going. We can get an automatic system going in the brain for reading words, spelling words. It becomes automatic the way it is for you and I. So when we do a daily review, we start at the bottom. What's the hardest thing the kids have to do? All right, what's the hardest thing? We're going to do a little editing activity. Look at the words in the editing activity. You have to know certain letter sounds and digraphs in order to be able to correct the spelling of the word. You also need to know the plus rule. In a one-syllable word with one vowel, ending in an L, an S, a Z or an F, you double usually the final consonant. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be pre-taught. So what we try and do is we teach all those things, so when the kids get to the tricky bit, they don't capitulate. They can all do it. Teachers of 4 to 7-year-olds, you need to be spending 50% of your time in literacy precursors around decoding. It's as simple as that. And don't divide their practice time. For older kids, here's a great passage. And if I'm going to teach this to kids, this helps me to shape what I put into my daily review, because I go, well, I'm going to do all these things anyway. So rather than doing every single sound, every digraph, don't need to do that. Just look at the ones in the poem. maybe that will help to guide me, so I don't have the kind of daily review, and I've seen them, that's 1,800 slides long, and the computer starts to buckle at the knees every time you boot it up. It's not what it's about. The PowerPoints are not long, but it's quite targeted. So we're always saying, hey brain, remember this, because you're going to have to use it in a moment. And you're not going to capitulate when you get to read that poem, because I would have pre-taught you all these things and reminded you of what was coming. When we do daily review in the Kimberley, and this actually is on the handout notes, we focus on all of these things. But we don't do it all at once because it's very overwhelming. We start usually with phonics, and we start with phonological awareness, and then we get reading fluency going. And then we usually worry about writing, and at the same time we worry about spelling, and then we worry about comprehension, and then we get vocabulary going. So this entire model takes me about 4 terms to trot out in schools. There's 4 days of professional learning. We do it slowly and gradually. And like your coaches for the Literacy Guarantee Unit, I have coaches as well who go in and support. So we're a bit of a tipping point in WA. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this, when something unique becomes common. Lots and lots of schools in WA do this. And here we are up in the Kimberley of WA, so that's where I live, down in Perth. So every 2 to 3 weeks I head up there, and I come out of Broome and we go off to various places. We go as north as Columbaroo, and we go as far to the east as Halls Creek. So it's a very big part of the world. It's a very socially diverse region. So these are pictures I took. It's absolutely a privilege to go and work in the Kimberley. We've got 23 schools now in the project. 2 are not government schools. We've got a Catholic and an independent school. The rest are all government schools. Lots of teachers, lots of kids, some big schools, some small schools, but we're all doing it. A big problem in the Kimberley is attendance. Lots of reasons why kids don't go to school. Lots of reasons. Some of them I can't do too much about. However, the thing that I can do something about was this problem. Because when I first went to the Kimberley, I met a man in a safari suit. And he said to me, Lorraine, I graduated in 1970, and I thought, yep. And I've been in the Kimberley for the last X number of years. And I'm really good at what I do. And I go, yeah, well, it might have been okay circa 1970, but we've actually moved on now. We don't teach whole words. We don't do multi-cueing. So we're going to stop doing those things that don't work, because none of the kids can read in the Kimberley, and we need to do something different. The great-great-grandmothers and the great-grandmothers, some of them can read because they were taught the other way. Then we did lots of other things that didn't work so well. Now we've got kids who are learning to read for the first time, who read better than their parents, and while that's not a good statistic in some regards, it is encouraging in others. So let's have a quick look in the time that we have left at a bit of a case study, just so you can see what it looks like. So all the schools that I like working in will not be defined by their postcode. They say that we will not be defined by our postcode. Explicit instruction is a humanistic approach. You don't blame the kids. If the kids aren't learning, that's your problem, that's not their problem. It is not caused by faulty children, it's caused by faulty instruction. And so that's how we approach it in the Kimberley. This is Dawson Park Independent Public School in Western Australia. It's got an ex-year of 973. It's a fantastic school. We have got a real problem with demountables now, because lots of kids come to our school who live in the area. Some can go to various schools. They've all walked with their feet now, and they've said, right, we will come to your school because the kids are a high-performing school. If you look at the NAPLAN data, I know 1 test, 1 day, but we started in 2014. You can see that it went up and down for a while. And occasionally we'd have a good year, then we'd have a bad year. A good year was always, oh, they were great kids. A bad year was, oh, well, tough cohort. When I first met the teachers, they said, well, you don't know our kids, you don't know our school, we're really good teachers, it's the kids. Same kids at the school. Kids haven't changed. And they'll still treat a relief teacher if they've got the chance. But look at the literacy levels. They're very, very good. Children at Dawson Park Primary School, if they start from the beginning, can all read fluently by the end of year 2. What we're trying to do then is to push that fluency right the way up the grades. So the kids read regular text, they read sonnets, they read speeches, historical speeches, they read passages from stories, they read all sorts of stuff. And there's a literature-based use to actually dig deeper and investigate how words are spelt. So it's all very, very, very structured. But we have a goal that every child at the end of year 2 will be reading. And if they're not reading and they've been with us from the very beginning, there's a really good reason why, because they have to be. We've got gold standard instruction going. At that school, it's not a question of which teacher. All the teachers are as good as each other. When we do daily review, here are some rules. The kids have got to be talking more than you, otherwise they're not learning anything. Some is really easy. We pitch most of it in the middle and some of it is extension, so I can always extend the kids. We differentiate at the point of individual need. So in exactly the same way that you didn't know what 15 times 15 is, some of you would have been doing 5 times 5. Some of you might have managed 10 by 10, 10 by 10. I could make it harder for you. In literacy, we use flashcards, we use songs, we use all sorts of thoroughly engaging things. It is an extravaganza to watch. People look at it and they go, oh, is that explicit instruction? Absolutely. No, we're not sitting in rows filling out worksheet. We're having a good time. So it's got to be fast-paced. It's got to be something that changes. If the kids can tell you what the next word is on your slide, then you need to change up your slides, because you use the same slides all the time and they vary enormously in the teachers that I use them with. And then the routines need to be constant. So Renee's routine that you've got a copy of is standard. The kids know what's coming next. She's not having to invent it every time she does it. And then we make sure that we always teach first. We're not testing. So can I finish with this slide and tell you that if you're embarking upon this journey, I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but I'm going to tell you that it's worth it. The data coming out of Kimberley is very good right now. We need to do this for between 5 to 7 years before we really show traction, because that's how many years we need to get those kids going. And that comes from the work of Eric Hanushek. Thank you.